Hi everyone, Stepan here. I'm going to show you my round 3 game from the Barcelona Open. This was a surprising opening to me, and my opponent was young, I think about 14, 15, I'm not sure. And she prepared something I haven't faced in a long time. So we have the Slav defense and we entered the Semi-Slav. And in this position, she played the move Queen d3. Now, Queen d3 is something I've of course seen before because I've been preparing the Semi-Slav for a long time, but I couldn't remember what exactly I'm supposed to do against it. I know I'm supposed to take on c4 and go b5. That much is easy to figure out. But then trying to consider all the options for the queen, whether it goes to d3 or to b3, is the first thing, and then the follow-up was the hard part. So I ended up spending maybe 15 minutes here trying to decide on my setup, and I've decided to try and punish the move e4 with b4 and bishop a6, which is a pattern well known in the Reynolds attack of the Semi-Slav defense, where if white makes a mistake and against b4 plays knight a4 instead of knight e2, you get to play bishop a6, preventing them from castling. Okay, but that's one idea. I also wasn't sure whether white should go g3 or e4. Both are possible. So let me show you what happened. So d takes, queen takes, b5. Okay, the queen went to d3. And now I asked my opponent what I was supposed to do against this because I wasn't sure, and she told me that a6 is the main move, which is true. Probably I've analyzed this position extensively since, and I think bishop b7 is what I would play now. It seems very promising. But during the game, since I didn't want to play bishop b7, I wanted to play bishop a6, I just decided to go bishop e7 and sort of save a tempo. You can also go knight bd7, that's also okay. However, on knight bd7 you also don't really have bishop a6 because nothing is defending a6. Okay, so I went bishop e7, which isn't precise, but the position is equal because queen d3 of course isn't the main move. And now if she wishes to avoid b4 and bishop a6, then maybe a3 is a move, trying to play b4. g3 is definitely a possibility. This is what I would play if I had the white pieces. And I'm not really sure how to describe that position. I played b5, so this diagonal is of course quite weak. After something like g3, bishop b7, bishop g2, knight bd7, we're in a sort of normal Catalan where for some reason there's a queen over here and I don't have an extra pawn on c4. So let's say castles, and it seems okay. But after bishop e7, sorry, by the way, people are starting to wake up in the house. It's quite early and my dog just woke up. So if you can hear steps and stuff, sorry about that. Okay, she did play e4 though. And when I was analyzing this, I saw that there were 14 games from this position. And I looked at all of them. Black actually scores quite well. Now, of course, I wasn't familiar with this exact position, but this is what I'd anticipated when she played queen d3. This is what I wanted to get, and I got it. Okay, so b4, knight a4. I believe it should be possible to go knight e2, but then I'm not really sure why the knight is on e2 and where the knight is going. So knight a4 may be better. Bishop a6, she has to go queen c2, otherwise I win the e-pawn after taking on f1. And this is the idea. I want to exchange my bad bishop and mess up her castling rights. So now I was quite happy. Of course, there's a weakness on c5, but at least I don't have a bishop behind these light squares or behind these the pawn on c6, and I don't have to deal with that. I castled, although I could have played queen a5 straight away, The idea is, of course, to take on e4 and take on a4. So I castled, she played g3, and now I played queen a5. And this is a pretty direct threat, although probably black has better moves, but I wasn't really sure how white should respond to this. I'm not really a big fan of b3, and I don't see any other option. Maybe knight c5, but then knight a6. Also, bishop g5 seems interesting, pinning my knight, but as soon as I go knight bd7, I'm defending the c5 square. She, of course, cannot take on c6 because of rook c8, any rook. So probably something like e5, knight d5, and this seems better than actually winning that pawn. Sorry, let me just open the door for my dog. Sorry about that, she would have kept making noises. So on queen a5 she had a long think, and in the end gave up the pawn. I asked her after the game why, and I don't really understand what the explanation was. But in any case, she played king g2, and I just took the pawn on e4. Now, I don't think there's a way to avoid taking that knight, because if she doesn't take that knight, then I just won a pawn for nothing. At least once she takes on e4 and I take on a4, my queen is misplaced and her queen is centralized. Now, I wouldn't say I have an advantage here, even though I just won a central pawn, because I still will struggle to play c5, and that's not going to be easy. So she played bishop g5, and the idea behind bishop g5 is, of course, if I take this, then the knight comes to g5, I'm forced to play g6, and she plays queen h4, and I'm much worse. For example, yeah, here now I have to play h5, and now g4 is coming, and this is just a dreadful position for me. So I cannot do that. I saw bishop g5 before she played it, and I'd already decided to go bishop d6. This way the knight cannot come into g5. My bishop is better than it was on e7, and yeah, I want to go c5. Okay, so rook h to c1, preventing c5, and queen b5. Now, queen b5 has three different ideas. Firstly, bringing my queen back into play. Secondly, pinning or tying down the knight to the bishop. Thirdly, preparing c5 if the queen moves away. And most importantly, attempting to trade queens. If I trade queens, not only can I play way more easily a pawn up without any tactical difficulties on h7, but also if she declines the trade, I can just go c5. Okay, so for example, if queen d5, queen c2, knight a6, and or not knight a6, I would have to defend with rook c8 first, but then knight a6. Okay, so she played bishop e3. I cannot allow any problems down this diagonal, so just queen d5. I'm sorry, my dog is playing with another dog. Just give me a second. Lucia, ali možeš odvesti neki? Okay, sorry about that. Yeah. Okay, so if she doesn't take, I think I'm much better. So she took. Okay, and now neither option is really good. ED and CD both have downsides. In the end, I went for CD, but ED seemed quite interesting to me, so I actually spent a long time here. If I take ED, the main issue is I'm going to struggle to develop this knight, and it doesn't seem clear to me at all how I should be doing that. For example, she can continue knight e1, let's say a5, knight d3, rook e8, maybe a3, which seems interesting, takes, a4, and after something like bishop f4, if I have to exchange the bishops, then I'm stuck with this stupid knight, and her knight is coming to d3 and to c5 again, and I wouldn't say I'm better at all. I visualized something like this, where we've traded off bishops and my knight is still on b8, and I just couldn't figure out how to make any progress. So I took with the c pawn. Now, of course, there's a downside to this as well. It's giving up these two squares eventually, and her rooks are going to double down the c file. And again, I'm going to struggle to develop, but at least there is no backwards pawn on c6. At least I don't give the extra pawn back in order to develop. And to be honest, I did not know how exactly I was going to bring all of my pieces out, but I was going to figure it out. Okay, she played knight e1. I should mention that black is better here, significantly better, and that my play was correct. So my idea was rook d8, knight d7, and if she allows it, knight b6, with the idea of rook c8 if allowed, or knight d7, knight f8, or knight d7, knight f6. Okay, knight d3 played, looking at c5, knight d7. She threw in bishop d2, but I want to go a5 anyway, so I've just defended my pawn. Rook c6, and now I can choose between knight f8 and knight f6. I chose knight f6. Maybe knight f8 was better, but I think they're equally good. Okay, she played f3, preventing knight e4. Not that I want to go knight e4, because f3 would then come with tempo. I just needed to defend my bishop and give myself the option to go knight e8 in the future, defending the bishop with the knight and controlling c7. So here I went h6. I think this is necessary. I don't want any trouble on the back rank in the future, and I can continue with my setup later on. Okay, rook ac1. Now king h7 may be a bit too much. Probably I could have played knight e8, and after something like bishop e3, just bishop e7, with the idea of controlling c7 with my knight, getting the bishop away so that the 6th rank isn't really a problem. And then maybe I can continue rook b8 and start creating weaknesses on the queen side, and then try to challenge the c-file. But I couldn't see how I was going to be challenging the c-file with a setup like this. So instead I went for king h7, just making sure there are no checks. And this did not help me. I ended up going back. But I thought this was a safe move, and I couldn't see how she makes progress. Knight c5, I take it. Knight e5, I take it. On knight f4, I was going to go g5. So yeah, she played bishop f4. And I was really happy to make this trade, because my bishop is a tactical liability, and this just makes it easier for me to push my queenside pawns. Also, the knight gets misplaced. So after bishop takes, knight takes, the knight is no longer controlling these two squares. Yeah, and now, according to the engine, black is just winning. This is now easily convertible by the engine. But I chose the wrong setup, which was still good, still gave me an advantage, but there was an easier way to go about it. So the easiest way was knight e8. And after, let's say, g4, knight d6. This is the idea. And she either plays b3, which isn't good, or the other rook comes to c5 to make sure the rooks aren't disconnected. So now I have the c4 square. And I could start with a4. I don't know what white does, so let's say h4. And now rook a b8. And if knight d3, for example, then a3. And I've created a bunch of weaknesses. For example, b takes, b takes. If rook a5, I just have rook b2 check. This would be a huge advantage to me. And this plan I didn't consider at all. So instead I went for rook a7. The idea behind rook a7 is to eventually either go rook d7, knight e8, rook c7, or to go knight d7 and try to double my rooks on the a file, and eventually trade something off on c7 and bring my king back, which is what I ended up doing. Now, it turned out okay. I managed to untangle, but it wasn't the most precise plan. As I said, knight e8. Okay, knight d3, knight d7. Again, here knight e8 was better with the plan of knight d6. It was just superior, because if the rook comes to c7 now, I have rook d7. If then rook c8, I have knight d6. And I'm not really worried about any checkmates, because I always have g5, preventing knight f4 and rook h8 mate. But I played knight d7, which isn't as precise. And after rook c7, white is almost equal. Okay, rook da8, this was my plan. Rook c6, g5, preventing knight f4, king f2, king g7, and now I want to bring my king back. My idea was to trade once on c7 and eventually play king d8, forcefully evicting the rook. Okay, because on rook b8 I have king c8 winning the rook. So that's what I did. King e3, king f8, f4, I can just ignore that, rook c7, rook c7, and king e8. Now I'm threatening king d8, evicting the rook, and then rook c8 winning on the spot. So I think knight e5 is forced. If she does something else, I don't know, something weird like this, then the rook has to move away, and now I'm a clean pawn up with no problems at all. So she played knight e5. I have to take this, although there was an option to go b3, but whether that helps me or not, I don't know. Of course she cannot win my knight because I played ba2 and queen, but I took the knight. Okay, and now I started going back, because I saw that if I manage to do this, I'm just going to win. This seemed to be the easiest plan to win the game. There were other options, but there are many ways to win from here. Black is, again, simply winning. I went king f8, king d3, king g7, king c2. Of course, I don't want to allow king to b3, so a4. Now, I'm not worried about my b-pawn, because I can infiltrate on e4 eventually if she goes for something like rook b7. But she went king b1. Okay, so b3, which is a very forcing move and the best move. I should mention this was move 38, so 2 more moves until time control. I think I had about 10 more minutes on the clock, so I was really looking forward to move 40. Rook b7 played, and I took on a2. Alternatively, taking and then going rook b7 is easily losing for white. Just a very simple win after rook a4, rook b3, rook d4, because now I can just go king g6, f5, and take on e5 and queen my d-pawn. So yeah, this pawn is definitely too slow. For example, if king g6, b4, king f5, b5, king e5, it's just there is nothing for white to do here. King b4, for example, king c3. I could go rook b1, or I could go rook a4. Doesn't really matter. Let's say rook b1, she chases me away, rook a1. Okay, and if king b2, I can now go rook a5, and my pawn is just queening. Eventually, I could even give up my rook for the pawn and still win if her king is too far away. But as I said, she went for rook b7, which seemed even more winning to me. So ba2, king a2, of course. And now g4 was my 40th move, so I had half an hour after this. Now g4 is necessary, because this is the pawn I'm going to queen, now that she didn't allow rook takes d4. So I'm going to be queening my g-pawn. That was the idea. And I want to go h5, h4, maybe rook c8, rook c2. Okay, king a3. Now at this point, I would like you to pause the video and find the win for black. There are 3 different winning ideas. Basically, everything you think of is going to be winning, but you have to be precise. There's one move that wins immediately, one move that wins with a bit of finesse, and one move which could lead to a draw if you aren't very precise. So pause the video, try to figure this out. Okay, The three moves I'm talking about are h5, king g6, and rook c8. And I spent 20 minutes of the half an hour I got after move 40 to figure things out. And I didn't figure everything out. Now let's go through them one by one. h5 I think is the easiest win. After h5, the only way for black to try and equalize is rook b4. Okay, and taking this pawn. So now you go rook c8. And if rook takes a4, rook c2, I don't know what white plays, let's say b4. You take on h2, b5, and you can just go h4, and that's it. If king b4 trying to get rook back, you go h3 and game over. This pawn is going to queen, there's nothing white can do about it. If the rook sacrifices itself on b1, then of course black is still winning after just picking up all the pawns. If king takes a4, it's the same thing, you just go rook c2. Let's say, I don't know, rook b7 or rook b8, rook h2, b4, rook a2 check. And now we have a choice. You can go king b5 or you can go king b3. King b3 loses a tempo because I'm going to take on g3 with check. Either case, winning for black very easily. Now, the engine approved way to win is also quite simple. King g6. And the fact is that now white simply doesn't have time for rook b4. And if white doesn't have time for rook b4, that means that black can do whatever black wants to do. So if rook b4, then king f5. And if you take the pawn, then I just go rook b8. Something like this. If rook b4, I'm going to decline the trade. So eventually, let's say b4 happens. And now king e4. And you don't have b5 because I'm going to take the b5 pawn. If you don't play b5, I'm going to take on d4. So if rook b4, then let's say check. If they try to repeat, you go back. If they try to repeat, you eventually move away. You can, let's say, move to f8 or to d8. Let's say you move away to f8. And now rook b7 doesn't exist, and you can try to pick up these pawns. If you want to trick white, I was going to play rook d8 in my analysis, and now after rook b7 you can just go king e4, and if f7 is taken, then yeah, you just rook g7 or rook, or let's say b4 even, king e3, rook g7 just d4, and this pawn is queening. There is no time for the rook to stop the pawn. So king g6 was the easiest way to win. I chose rook c8, which is still winning, but it's not that easy. King takes a4, of course, and now you have to be precise. I played rook c2, which isn't precise. Rook c2 is almost a draw. Why? Well, you have to throw in rook c4. That was the best move. And if rook b4 to block the check, then you go rook c2, and the rook is blocking the b pawn, so black just lost a very crucial tempo. If b4, then you take on d4. Okay, and if the king moves away somewhere, it either lines up with black taking the g-pawn with check, or if it goes to the 5th rank, it's too far away to prevent rook b1, for example. And the king starts moving away, and then eventually I'm going to be able to get behind the pawn. The way it was played in the game with the king on a4, the king is quick enough, and that's the crucial error I'd made. I'd miscalculated, or I haven't visualized the sequence correctly. I couldn't see that the king is going to be in time. So I played rook c2, b4, rook h2, she played rook c7. She has to go back and go rook c1, otherwise I'm just going to do this and queen. So I played rook h3, b5, rook g3, rook c1, and now you can see how having the king on a5 would have helped. If the king was on a5, I could just go rook g2 and rook b2, and very, very simple, when I can just give up my rook whenever I want to and queen one of the pawns. I played rook g2 anyway, and now king b3. The difference is, if the king was on a5, she could have played king b4 here, and then rook b2 wins immediately. Now the game is drawn. I don't have anything but to repeat. If I don't repeat, I'm actually going to lose, because the b pawn is too quick. I don't have a way to give up my rook. If I could find a way to get behind the pawn or in front of the pawn, then I'm just winning. But unfortunately, there's an h pawn here. If I didn't have the h pawn, maybe I would have played on. But now rook g3 and repetition. I have to repeat, otherwise I just lose. So I think I played well. Maybe some minor mistakes up until this point, where I chose rook c8, which wasn't precise. I should have gone for h5 and g6. Now this time I did see the moves, I did try to calculate, and I thought everything was winning, and in my mind rook c8 was the simplest win, which is absurd. Still, rook c8 with rook c4 is an easy win. This is way, way simpler. But yeah, I messed it up, and I drew a low rated player, unfortunately, which wasn't good for my tournament. But what can you do? Yeah, I hope you got something from the game. It was extremely instructive for me, and I think I ended up learning a ton during my analysis. Hope it was the same for you. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned for more chess. Bye bye.